General Hospital spoilers for Thursday, May 1st, tease that Laura is increasingly sensing the instability in Lulu's eyes and behavior, her daughter, whom she has always loved and worried about. After a long period of unconsciousness and absence from daily life, Lulu is now like a blazing fire, more determined than ever to reclaim what she believes is rightfully hers, most notably Dante's affection. But this awakening only makes Laura uneasy. Unlike the gentleness, caution, and reason that she was once known for, Lulu is now acting boldly, extremely, and even somewhat recklessly. Laura has been quietly observing, and on several occasions, has suggested to her daughter that she be cautious, slow down, and understand that the world, and Dante, have changed. But Lulu looks at her mother with the fiery eyes of a woman who has lost everything and is fighting to regain the last pieces. Lulu cannot accept the reality that, during the years she lay unconscious, Dante has built a new relationship. She sees it as a betrayal. A knife wound deep into the heart of a wife who once loved completely. So, she decides not to wait for anyone's pity or for affection to be given back. She wants to fight, to reverse the situation. To prove that she is still the Lulu she once was, and more. But it is this desire that is leading her down a dangerous path. Her actions are becoming more and more out of control, from inserting herself into Dante's life, to suddenly approaching Rocco, to stalking and trying to break up the new relationships Dante is forming. She justifies it as love, as maternal instinct, but Laura knows deep down that this is a Lulu who is panicking, losing herself in the obsession of a love that is no longer whole. Laura cannot stop Lulu with force, but she tries with understanding. She reminds her daughter that all emotions have limits. That by acting impulsively, Lulu could not only lose Dante forever but also plunge herself into the abyss. But Lulu does not listen. She has waited too long to live again, to be loved. To hear her son call her Mom, to feel Dante's embrace as before. And now, as all of this slips further out of reach, she is willing to destroy everything to pull back what was once hers. One of the new, crazier traits forming is Lulu's defiance. She no longer distinguishes between love and control, between fighting for family and manipulating others' lives. She believes anyone present in Dante's life is an enemy, an obstacle, someone to be eliminated. And that is what scares Laura the most, that the strong, kind daughter she once knew is turning into a woman who is controlled by her emotions, by the fear of loss, and by a blind obsession with the past. While Laura hopes for a miracle that will make Lulu step back and see things clearly, time is pushing everything toward an inevitable turning point. And if Lulu continues on this path, the fight to win back Dante will no longer be about love, it will be a battle of destruction, for both Lulu and everyone she touches. Brook Lynn is standing in the middle of a violent whirlwind of complex emotions, where truth, the past, and long-buried schemes are gradually surfacing like a volcano about to erupt. In a rare moment, when her heart can no longer hide the pain and fear, she turns to Tracy, the woman who was once the sternest and most distant figure in the family, for a candid, profound, and critical conversation. But this conversation is not just between two generations, between two women bound by blood. It marks the beginning of a simmering confrontation. As old calculations are starting to be adjusted by new threats, unexpected dangers, especially involving the secret of Brook Lynn's child, Gio. Tracy can clearly sense that something is wrong. Brook Lynn has not come to simply ask for advice or share personal troubles. Her eyes are tense, her voice choked with fear. Brook Lynn is no longer the rebellious young woman she once was. She is now a mother, a woman fighting to protect her son from something she cannot even speak of. But Tracy, with her sharp instincts and years of experience, slowly nudges Brook Lynn to confront what she has been trying to hide. And bit by bit, the truths begin to emerge. No one in the family knows the real origin of Gio. From the moment the boy appeared, Brook Lynn has been vague about his father, about his birth circumstances, and about the time she disappeared from Port Charles. But now, those secrets are haunting her. Someone, or some force, is holding that information and is starting to use it to blackmail Brook Lynn, manipulating her with a past she thought had been buried forever. Tracy is shocked when Brook Lynn speaks of anonymous calls, unsent letters, and veiled threats that if she does not comply with demands, the truth about Joe's biological father will come to light, a man who is not only controversial but could also cause a huge scandal for the Quartermaine family. Brook Lynn is being dragged into a vortex where she can no longer tell the difference between the limits of silence, the boundaries of protecting her son, and the point at which she is willing to sacrifice everything to keep Gio safe. The more she talks, the more Brook Lynn reveals the new obsession that is eating away at her reason, the fear that one day Gio will grow up and learn the truth, that he will look at her with disappointed eyes, that the whole family will turn away when they find out she made an unforgivable mistake. And this is what truly worries Tracy. Because of this fear, Brook Lynn might be pushed onto a new, wrong path, cooperating with the person who is blackmailing her, making hasty decisions, or worse, losing herself in the process of trying to protect what she holds most dear. New calculations are forming in Brook Lynn's mind, not to defeat anyone, but to survive. But in that survival, she is facing one of the greatest dangers: losing the trust of her loved ones and becoming a pawn controlled in a game she was never ready to play. Tracy knows this, and with rare clarity, she offers advice, not with commands or imposition as she did in the past, but with the heart of someone who has made many mistakes and sacrificed a lot for family. She tells Brook Lynn, "Don't let the ghost of the past pull you away from who you really are. The more you stay silent, the more they control you. And if you don't act at the right moment, you'll not only lose Gio, but you'll lose yourself too." In that moment, Brook Lynn looks at Tracy not with doubt or resistance. She understands that this battle cannot be fought alone. The secrets about Gio will not disappear just because she stays silent. And what's even more terrifying is, someone knows everything. And they are waiting for the perfect moment to destroy everything Brook Lynn is trying to protect. Jocelyn is stepping into a world she never imagined, a world where right and wrong become blurred, where seemingly harmless relationships conceal deadly traps, and where every decision could trigger a chain of irreversible tragedies. Since Dalton's arrival, Jocelyn has always felt that something was off about this man, his excessive charm, his vast knowledge that grew too quickly, and the strange connection he had to the shadowy world of the underground that poor Charles had never known. But instead of avoiding or raising alarms, Jocelyn chose a far more dangerous path. She proactively approached him, devised a new plan to interact, and began to uncover Dalton's secrets from the inside. However, what Jocelyn didn't anticipate was the degree of obsession she was slowly falling into. She was no longer simply tracking Dalton as part of an investigative exercise. She began thinking about him daily, dissecting his every action, analyzing every word, and building a psychological profile around him. She rewrote her diary, created narrative diagrams, and spent hours connecting seemingly unrelated clues. Jocelyn was being controlled by Dalton, not through attraction, but by an obsession driven by her need to uncover the truth to the point where she was losing her own sense of safety. Her plan didn't stop at mere surveillance. She started to build a false relationship with Dalton, using her innocence and her wits to create a sense of trust, and slowly infiltrate his world. She staged casual meetings, had indirect conversations through Emma, and even arranged situations that made Dalton feel she was no threat. But here, a new danger began to stir, a danger Jocelyn wasn't mature enough to fully grasp. Dalton knew. He knew someone was watching him. And now, he was playing the game, his way. What made matters worse was Emma, who had once been an unwitting intermediary, was now becoming a pawn in the plan. She had no idea she was being used as a tool for Jocelyn to get closer to Dalton. But slowly, Emma was being drawn into inexplicable situations. Secret documents vanished from the professor's office, mysterious conversations about illegal research organizations were overheard. And Emma was unknowingly being followed. Between the two young women, a silent alliance was beginning to form, not through words, but through the growing shared fear. Dalton was not a normal man. He was a storm approaching. Jocelyn and Emma were no longer just students exploring intellectual pursuits. They had become players in a life-or-death game, where every step could lead to tragedy. And this was proving that a great change was unfolding, not only in how they saw the world but also in who they had become. Jocelyn was no longer the girl who only knew how to love, protect her family, and fight for simple justice. She was changing, maturing, and being molded by the darkness she had decided to walk into. Emma, too, was no longer an outsider. She was learning to doubt. Learning to fight against fear, and learning to protect not just Jocelyn but herself. This change was clear evidence that the story was no longer about a simple search for the truth. It had become a series of significant events that, if not stopped soon, would engulf not only Jocelyn and Emma but everyone connected to Dalton, because he was not just a mysterious man. He was a system. A secret. A monster nurtured in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to explode. And Jocelyn, with her courage and also her innocence, had unwittingly become the one to trigger that bomb. Drew was trying to explain, but every justification he attempted fell into the silent, frozen space between him and Willow. No response from her. No tears, no shake of her head, or familiar hand squeeze he had once received during the times they trusted each other. Willow just stood there, silently staring at the man she had once placed all her trust in, the man she had seen as her safe harbor after the storms of her life, who was now the source of a disaster spreading like an uncontrollable oil spill. It wasn't because Drew had slept with another woman that she had fallen apart, but because that very act had flung open the door to an even scarier truth, that from the beginning, everything she had believed to be love, protection, and companionship might have just been a show Drew put on to serve a completely different purpose. Willow recalled recent moments, such as when Drew pressured her to sign custody papers for Wiley and Amelia, his soft but forceful words that it was preparing for the future, just in case something happens. And for the kids' benefit. But now, standing in the midst of this humiliating betrayal, she began to piece everything together. Drew's increasing control over the children's care schedule, his constant representation in decisions regarding their health and education, and how he slowly isolated Michael from the family picture, all of it was no longer a coincidence. It was a plan. A series of deliberate adjustments, step by step, pushing Willow out of the center so that Drew could become the only one holding power in the family she had built with blood and tears. Now, with Drew secretly involved with another woman, the truth was no longer just about marital betrayal. It was a clear sign that she was no longer in Drew's calculated orbit. She had played her part, signed the papers, handed over the kids, trusted him completely. And now that she was no longer needed, he was ready to discard her as though she were just a temporary part of his long-term plan, a plan to take all the inheritance, control the children, and secure a central role in both the Quartermain and Corinthos family power structures. Willow had once thought Drew was a replacement for Michael when their love fell apart. She had once thought he was her safe haven when torn between two families, two children, and two opposing worlds. But now, she understood better than ever, Drew hadn't come to love her. He had come to exploit her, to use the family name to steal everything. And his affair wasn't about infatuation or weak emotions, it was because Willow no longer had value in his plans. She was now just an unwilling witness to a scheme driven by greed, calculation, and coldness disguised as love. But what Drew hadn't anticipated was that Willow was no longer the woman who could be manipulated so easily. Her silence wasn't submission, it was the buildup of a fury waiting to erupt. She had lost Michael, she had nearly lost her life to a cruel disease, and she had stood on the edge of life and death. Now, with betrayal coming from the one person she trusted the most, Willow feared nothing. She couldn't let her children grow up in lies. She couldn't let Wiley and Amelia be controlled by a man who saw them as mere tools to seize power. And she certainly couldn't let herself become a silent pawn in the game Drew was playing. Willow didn't say much. She walked out of the room where Drew stood, leaving him with words left unsaid. With a fear he didn't yet fully understand, because he had just awakened a new Willow. A mother, a woman, a warrior who had walked through hell and would never let anyone trample over her again. Her fight was no longer about reclaiming love or honor. It was a fight for the truth, for her children, and for justice for everything she had lost. And Drew, no matter how many steps ahead he thought he was, would now face the consequences of what he had sown, because Willow would not remain silent, would not forgive, and would stop at nothing to protect what was left. Chase entered the room with a heavy gaze and purposeful steps, carrying a weight he could no longer keep inside. This wasn't a casual meeting or simply sharing personal concerns. No, this time, Chase came with a clear purpose. He wanted Dante to act. Not tomorrow, not in a few weeks, but right now. Because things had gone too far, and the truth about Gio, that the boy was Dante and Brook Lynn's biological son, had just been revealed, placing everything into a state of urgency that could not wait. Dante, though outwardly maintaining his calm, immediately felt the pressure in Chase's voice. This was no longer a colleague, no longer a close friend, but a man carrying both anxiety and disappointment, coming to awaken Dante to a responsibility he had long avoided. Chase didn't mince words. He directly stated that Gio was growing up in chaos. Surrounded by whispers behind his back, with a huge void of identity that was making the boy start to ask questions no one could answer with the truth. And while Brook Lynn was struggling alone to shield, protect, and preserve the fragile peace for her son, Dante remained silent, standing outside it all as if he had no part in it. As if Gio wasn't his blood. But Chase wasn't there to blame. He was there to demand that Dante act, and act immediately. There was no time for hesitation. No room for fear or guilt. Because if Dante didn't step forward, if he didn't officially claim his role as a father, if he didn't stand with Brook Lynn and Gio now, the consequences would be far worse than a broken family. It would be a child growing up in the darkness of lies, lost and confused about who he was, carrying wounds that nothing could heal. Chase spoke in a calm but sharp tone, reminding Dante that he had always stood for justice, for the truth, for family. He had once risked his life to protect the people of Port Charles, faced death to protect the vulnerable. But now, when his own son needed him more than ever, Dante was avoiding it. Chase couldn't understand what was holding him back. Was it guilt for not being there for Brook Lynn when she was pregnant? Or was it the fear that this truth would disrupt everything he was trying to build? But none of that mattered anymore. The only thing that mattered now was that Gio needed to know who his father was, and that his father was ready to stand up, face the truth, and fulfill that role. Dante felt suffocated. He had tried to convince himself that silence was the best option, that keeping the truth hidden was to protect Gio from the prying eyes and cruel judgments of society. But Chase was right. His silence was creating distance, making Brook Lynn the lone shield bearing the weight of everything, and causing Gio to grow up with uncertainty about his own origins. Each day that passed without Dante acting was a day Gio sank deeper into feelings of abandonment, a pain Dante himself had once endured and had vowed his son would never experience. Chase looked directly into Dante's eyes one last time before leaving behind a statement that froze the room. If you won't do this for Brook Lynn, then do it for Gio. The boy needs his father. Not tomorrow. Today. And with that, the door closed, leaving Dante standing alone, with heavy breaths and a decision knocking at his heart that could no longer be ignored. Because if he didn't act now, there would be nothing left to salvage. No chance to make amends. No time to make it right.